Now with a look at what stories are making the headlines this Sunday, it's the very latest ITV News.
The Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, resigns. In the last half an hour, the corporation announced that both Mr Davie and the CEO of News, Deborah Turness, are stepping down. The dramatic move follows criticism that a BBC Panorama documentary misled viewers by editing a speech by the US President Donald Trump. We'll have the latest. Also tonight. At the 11th hour, silence in memory of the fallen. The King leads Remembrance Sunday commemorations with 20 surviving World War II veterans centre stage.
I was one of the lucky ones. I came home, but all those thousands of men that were killed, it was such a young fellas and that sort of thing. Such a waste.
A super typhoon has begun to batter the Philippines with 1 million people evacuated in its path.
Holland's up!
And Man City and Liverpool battle it out to chase down Arsenal at the top. On TV News with Romilly Weeks. Good evening. We start with some breaking news tonight. It's just been announced that the BBC Director General Tim Davie and the CEO of News, Deborah Turness, have both resigned. The dramatic departures follow criticism of how a speech by US President Donald Trump was edited on an episode of Panorama. Mr Davie said that it was his decision to leave the BBC and admitted that mistakes had been made for which he takes responsibility. Well, Graham Stoddard joins me now. Graham, this news just breaking, but BBC bosses have been under a lot of pressure over this.
Absolutely. This is a huge changing of the guard at the very top of the BBC. Tim Davie has been General Director since 2020, but he's been there for 2 decades. As you say, he's tonight seemingly resigned. He will no longer be the BBC Director General, but also going with him, the CEO of News, Deborah Turness, also resigning following an internal memo in which related to a BBC Panorama documentary. Now, in a statement, the BBC has said Tim Davie, BBC Director General, has announced his intention to leave the BBC. CEO of BBC News, Deborah Turness, has also resigned. This is a sad day for the BBC. Tim has been an outstanding Director General for the last 5 years. He has propelled the BBC forward with determination, single-mindedness and foresight. Now, make of that what you will, but here's what Roger Mosey, who's a former head of BBC Television News, had to say.
The role of editor-in-chief and DG of the BBC is becoming close to undoable. I think the pressures on that job and the recent history of people having to quit shows it is extraordinarily tough. And also, the BBC has to get its journalism sorted out, and that was what Tim was trying to do. But still, there are these pitfalls and these barriers which mean that this kind of fall has happened.
So he was put into place in 2020, and arguably it was a moment a year after that set these wheels into motion. Donald Trump speaking ahead of the January 6th Capitol riots. That speech edited into a Panorama documentary, which now an internal memo suggesting it had been edited to suggest he had explicitly encouraged those riots. Those are just reports at the moment. There's been questions of impartiality at the BBC. There have been questions raised about systemic violence. In his own statement, Tim Davie said, there have been some mistakes made, and as a Director General, I have to take ultimate responsibility.
Difficult day for him, difficult day for the BBC. Graham, thank you. The King was joined by thousands of armed forces veterans today as the nation paused to remember those who've died in conflict. At the Cenotaph in central London, in Edinburgh, Belfast, Cardiff, and in towns and villages across the UK, people gathered to observe a 2-minute silence on Remembrance Sunday. In London, around 10,000 veterans took part in a march past the cenotaph. Among them, 20 who fought in the Second World War, which ended 80 years ago this year. Ellie Pitt reports.
With the sound of a bell, 2 sacred minutes of silence started. The nation paused to honour peace and remember those who never lived to see it. For more than 100 years, we have marked the moment the bullets stopped. But it is a gun, and then a bugle that breaks the quiet. The king laid his wreath first. It is similar in design to his grandfather's, King George VI, who led the country on the first official Remembrance Sunday in 1946. Prince William, the former search and rescue pilot with 7 years' service, followed. Before political leaders paid their tributes too. The few veterans with service of the Second World War in living memory were at the front of the parade, this year marking 80 years since the end of that conflict.
I think it's a great honour to come here because I was one of the lucky ones. I came home. But all those thousands of men that were killed, it was such a young fellows and that sort of thing. Such a waste. Such a terrible tragedy. And of course, it's going on today.
Thousands of military personnel and veterans marched this morning, many thinking of friends lost in combat.
The opportunity to march with such a great organisation like the Afghan veterans community that brings everybody together and really drives that makes sure that those who served are never forgotten.
I served several tours in Northern Ireland, and sadly I've lost quite a few of my colleagues through to that conflict or campaign, whatever you want to call it. And I'm marching today to keep their memory alive.
The tradition of the ceremony at the cenotaph is as constant as the reason it is held, to honour the sacrifice of those who were not there. Ellie Pitt, ITV News.
Around 1 million people have been forced to flee their homes as super typhoon Feng hits the Philippines tonight. The massive storm has already killed 2 people before it made landfall and comes less than a week after another typhoon which left more than 200 people in the region dead. The storm is passing over the Philippines right now, with people across the country praying they'll be spared the worst of the devastation. With the latest, here's Vincent McAviney.
Upgraded to a super typhoon just before making landfall, Feng struck the northern Philippines as night fell, with sustained winds of over 150 miles per hour. Fears of heavy rain triggering flash floods and landslides have forced hundreds of thousands to evacuate flimsy homes for stronger structures like churches and sports centres. Those living in coastal areas have also been evacuated inland due to the high risk of tidal surges. This is not the first typhoon this season, but it may be, in terms of its size, the biggest, bringing huge quantities of rain, which is worrying the government and emergency services. Last week, at least 200 people died in Typhoon Kalmegi when flash floods surprised authorities.
So the Philippines for the last 3 years has been ranked the most disaster-prone country in the world. So it's unfortunately no stranger to these events. They just had a large typhoon, caused a lot of flash flooding, and as a result, it took some time for really the extent of the damages to be seen. So very much in that part of the country, people are still, reeling from that disaster.
People in the Philippines may be used to this kind of weather, but the intensity of this year's typhoon season has taken its toll.
This is our fourth typhoon, major typhoon in a row. We've had 2 earthquakes. This has all happened in the last 6 to 7 weeks. So we've been responding. Our funds are starting to get exhausted because of the number of emergencies.
The Philippines civil aviation regulator has closed several airports and almost 300 flights have been cancelled. Feng Wong is expected to weaken as it crosses the country, but is likely to remain at typhoon strength. Vincent McAviney, ITV News.
3 people have been killed after being pulled into the sea by strong waves off the Tenerife coast. Officials say 15 others were injured in a number of incidents during the tidal surge on Saturday. And more than 1,300 flights across the US have been cancelled today as the federal government shutdown continues. Some air traffic controllers who've gone unpaid for nearly a month have stopped going to work. Back here, the government will be hoping this week passes without news of any more prisoners being released in error after a series of embarrassing and high-profile manhunts. Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy today came to the defence of Justice Secretary David Lammy, insisting he is gripping the problem. Well, Lucy McDade joins me now. Lucy, ministers are desperate to get on top of this issue now, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And you know, they have said, we know that this type of thing does happen, but the issue is now it's in the spotlight, the public are aware of it, and understandably, people feel unsafe. Let's just, I think, go back to where it started. Remember Hadish Kabatu, an Ethiopian sex offender? He was wrongly released from prison last month. His offence was the one that caused those riots over the summer outside the asylum seeker hotel in Epping. After that, David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, said he would introduce the toughest checks immediately. 2 days later, another mistaken release, this time another sex offender. This then kind of unravelled when, in the Commons this week, David Lammy was asked about it, asked if he knew about it. He refused to answer those questions, despite having the information. Now, the Conservatives say there needs to be an investigation into this. Let's just hear what the Culture Secretary said about it earlier today.
We absolutely back David Lammy. He's done, even in the last few days, he's called together prison governors. He has established a new set of emergency checks on people being released from prison. And he has brought in one of the most distinguished people in the country to get a grip on the chaos that we inherited. It's really important that he's able to get on with that work.
Politically, the government just needs this to go away. It's been the end of another really bad week of headlines. Keir Starmer was in Brazil talking about climate change this week, and frankly, he's probably sat at home tonight thinking all of this has been completely overshadowed.
I bet. Lucy, thank you. Sport now, and life for Wales under new head coach Steve Tandy has got off to the worst possible start. The home side was soundly beaten 52-28 by Argentina in Cardiff. The Tories ran in 7 tries to claim their biggest ever win over their opponents. The wait for a home win goes on for Wales. They haven't won on home turf in over 2 years. And finally, 2 of the sides hoping to chase down Arsenal in the Premier League title race met today. Manchester City hosted Liverpool, with neither able to afford to lose any more ground to the league leaders. So who would stake their claim as challengers? Chris Scudder was watching.
7 defeats between them already this season. It was looking like an either-or to challenge Arsenal for the title. Neither then could afford to lose, and Liverpool were quickly in trouble. Penalty to City, with a bit of help from VAR. But redemption came from the man who gave it away, Mamarashvili, saving from the man who rarely misses, Erling Haaland. But even when he does miss, he usually scores as well. Liverpool then thought they'd equalised through Virgil van Dijk, but controversially it was ruled out for offside, even though Andy Robertson did not appear to be interfering with the goalkeeper's rule. And that was twice as painful as City went 2-0 in front. Celebrations from Pep Guardiola on his 1000th match as manager. City were rampant, and Jeremy Doku made it 3 with a beauty. For Liverpool, it never rains, it pours. Their title defence looks to be in tatters, but City and Pep could be right back in it. Chris Scudder, ITV News.
And that's all for now. We will be back at 10 tonight with the latest on those BBC resignations. Until then, have a lovely evening. Goodbye.
Today we'll see warmer